what America has done with their involvement in the Middle East, plus the development of shale, is wreck the united stance of the Islamist countries against America and the West. The more developed liberal countries, they want to trade, they want to participate in the wealth-creating activities of capitalism, of free markets. And what has been achieved is a globalized system of trade that did not exist in the year 2000. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Moneyball Method Podcast. My name is Mark Shupe, the author of the Moneyball Method, a Middle-Class Manifesto for Objective Investing. And if you were tuned in last week, you may recall that I discussed the ideas, the concepts, the practice of just war theory. I discussed the nature of war, and in particular, the right of self-defense, all in the context of the Israeli and American decapitation of the Islamic State leadership last week. And at the end of last week's podcast, I indicated that I would continue the conversation and talk about the broader context of American involvement in the Middle East and Southern Asia and the economic impact that this has had on all of those countries. And I'm going to go back to the year 2000. I'm going to go back 25 years. And the first historical item I would like to mention is the 2001 war on the World Trade Center by the Islamists that flew planes into the World Trade Center, Towers 1 and 2, the Pentagon, and had the Capitol in their sights. In particular, what was America's response to that vicious, unprovoked act of envy and war and death? The first thing that the Bush administration did was launch an invasion in Afghanistan to find the organizers, the culprits, the leadership of that mission. Next up was the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Now, we're going to talk about this from the perspective of a boomer generation male living in the eastern half of the United States. My perspective was that, looking back, hindsight being 2020, that the invasion of Iraq was counterproductive, horribly expensive, and perhaps targeted the wrong enemy. But at the same time, I now have the benefit of somebody else's perspective. I have the perspective of a millennial who grew up in the Eastern Hemisphere, who's asked me to discuss the impact of the events of early 2000s and the aftermath in terms of economics, globalization, and trade, and how that may have benefited everyone in the long run. In order to do that, I'd like to discuss some of the geopolitics that was going on at the round of the time at the year 2000. According to moderndiplomacy.com, India was aligned with Russia. And I quote, on October 3rd, 2000, Prime Minister Atal Bihari and President Vladimir Putin cemented India-Russian bilateral ties with the signing of the historical agreement, the declaration of the India-Russia Strategic Partnership. That was 2000. India was aligned with Russia. Pakistan, neighboring Afghanistan, of course, was aligned with America at the time. Foreign aid to Pakistan peaked at $2.7 billion in 2010, but it has since dropped to $169 million in 2024, a drop of over 90%. Also in the year 2000, the Islamic Middle East was united in opposition against America and Israel. So that was part of the geopolitical arrangements in the year 2000, just prior to the World Trade Center attacks of September 11th, 2001. And what I'd like to do now is take a look at the relative economic freedom of some of those countries in the year 2000 and compare it to the economic freedom that they enjoy today. or that they don't enjoy, as the case may be. Like I did a few weeks ago, I'm going to use the Heritage Foundation Index of Economic Freedom survey, and I'm going to do this with 8 countries, predominantly in the Middle East and South Asia. Ranking number 7 out of 8 in the year 2000, 25 years ago, was India. It has since increased or improved to a ranking of number 5 among these 8 countries. Dead last in the survey was Iran in the year 2020. Dead last in the survey 25 years later, the year 2025, was Iran. Number 3 in the survey 25 years ago was Israel. Fairly good, strong economic freedom, certainly a strong, vibrant free market economy, certainly compared to almost anywhere else in the world. And they continue to be ranked number 3 25 years later. Ranked number 6 out of 8 in the bottom half was Lebanon. Lebanon dropped to number 7 out of these 8 countries 25 years later. Ranked 5th in this survey 25 years ago was Pakistan, and they have also dropped from number 5 to number 6, both in the bottom half and dropping. Qatar ranked 4th in the survey 25 years ago, and it has risen to number 2 among these 8 countries in the year 2025. Saudi Arabia ranked 2nd 25 years ago, and it has dropped to number 4, but still ranks in the top half of these 8 countries. Ranking number 1 25 years ago was the United Arab Emirates, and they continue to be ranked number 1 as we speak. What is significant to me about these changes in the rankings and the changes in economic freedom is that 5 of these 8 countries, their relative economic freedom improved over the last 25 years. Their economic freedom increased. Perhaps as a result of America's involvement in the Mideast ever since 9/11. People want and need to do business with America. America's presence does have an impact. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of lives here. A 10% increase in economic freedom times hundreds of millions of lives means freedom, prosperity, people living the one life they have with relative happiness and comfort compared to what it was like in the year 2020. But Lebanon and Pakistan are 2 of the countries that dropped. They were already in the bottom half. They had nowhere to go but up, but they fell. Why did Pakistan and Lebanon drop in terms of the ranking in the Economic Freedom Index? Perhaps it has to do with the fact that they chose not to become more capitalist, more free market oriented, more aligned with the West. They chose to retain their primitive, tribal, violent, cultural heritage. That's what I call the qualitative aspect of my discussion today. The Heritage Foundation survey is based on 10 different factors with different weightings that they rank according to their own metrics. Economic freedom is an abstract concept. We can't measure it perfectly in every situation. So what I'm going to do now is turn to the more qualitative aspects of what happened in these countries and these economies since the year 2000, since 9/11, since the invasion of Iraq by U.S. forces and UK forces. Unfortunately, the quantitative data I have is dominated by gross domestic product, GDP. And the numbers I have come from the International Monetary Fund through Wikipedia. And to qualify the veracity of this data, I am going to quote my source. Figures are based on an official exchange rates, not on purchasing power parity methodology. Values are given in millions of United States dollars and have not been adjusted for inflation. So these numbers are useful in terms of comparing one country to another, and that is what I'm going to use them for. And what I have now is 12 different countries. I've added 4, 3 of them from South America, 1 from the Middle East. The country with the highest gross nominal GDP growth from 2020 to 2025 was Qatar, up 1,151%. Number 2 was India, up 812%. Number 3 was Saudi Arabia, up 500%. Number 4 was United Arab Emirates, up 452%. Fifth was Chile, up 363%. And sixth was Israel, up 300%. That is the top half of these 12 countries. Israel up about 300%. And the reason that matters is because between the year 2000 and the year 2025, there was inflation. If we tried to adjust these numbers for inflation, what would be the rate of GDP growth that would be break even, adjusted for inflation? About 300% in US dollars. So these top 6 countries actually had real GDP growth, meaning adjusted for inflation, that was positive. That leaves the other 6 countries that had GDP growth of less than 300%. Topping that list, Pakistan up 277%, Syria up 202%, Argentina up 81%, Lebanon up 41%, Iran up 26%, Venezuela negative 6%. What kind of country has negative GDP growth over the last 25 years? And that's not even adjusted for inflation. Can you imagine if it wasn't adjusted for inflation, it would be really bad, particularly in their own currencies. What is the demand for the currency of Pakistan, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, or Venezuela? It ain't much. The point is that the bottom 6 countries are not free market economies. The bottom 6 countries have not embraced capitalism. They are totalitarian dictatorships, or they are stuck on primitive tribal cultural traditions that force them into totalitarian dictatorships. What are the lessons that we can learn from this? Again, the year 2000 through the year 2025. What impact did America's involvement in the Middle East have on the economies of those countries, the relative prosperity and freedom and ability of each individual to pursue their own lives, liberties, and pursuit of happiness? In terms of gross domestic product, the 3 OPEC countries did the best: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates. The Islamist countries did the worst: Syria, Iran, Lebanon. India, Israel, and Pakistan were second best among this group if we divide them into quartiles. And the South American countries did poorly, except for Chile. Let's go back to the top. Why did the 3 OPEC countries do the best with regard to GDP? Well, first of all, what does GDP measure? It measures exports. These are exporting countries. We all know what they export. It's oil. And net exports have a very positive impact on the GDP calculation, which means having a trade deficit has a negative impact on the GDP deficit. GDP is heavily influenced by trade imbalances, which tells me, and hopefully tells you and my audience, that Israel did a lot better than the GDP numbers indicate. Israel is a net importer. They have trade deficits with the rest of the world. However, Israel is second only to Silicon Valley in terms of high-tech innovation and development. They have many large, modern, peaceful, thriving cities. They're doing better than their surrounding counterparts, almost all of them combined, exceptions being countries like the UAE. And OPEC has these huge trade surpluses because of oil exports. Where do those oil exports go? They go to America, they go to Europe, they go to the West, they go to the most productive economies in the world. They are used to power machinery. What is machinery? Machinery is frozen intelligence. The OPEC countries are not producing great wealth other than the energy reserves that were developed by the West in the first place. However, what we have seen and what I have been educated by my friend who lives in the Eastern Hemisphere and is a generation younger than I am, and who has a much different perspective on global politics and history than I do, has informed me that what America has done with their involvement in the Middle East, plus the development of shale, is wreck the united stance of the Islamist countries against America and the West. The more developed liberal countries, they want to trade, they want to participate in the wealth-creating activities of capitalism, of free markets. And what has been achieved is a globalized system of trade that did not exist in the year 2000. The bottom line is that every civilized country had to embrace capitalism. We now have women who are able to drive cars in Saudi Arabia. We now have Arab countries aligning themselves with free market Western modern countries because they want to participate in the prosperity, and they do not want any more of the violence, the tribalism, the warfare, and this is good. The very existence of America and free trade and capitalism benefits everyone. I hope this gives you some perspective. It certainly did me as I tried to research some of the economic data that I was challenged to discover on my own. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for joining me.